All right, folks, we'll get started. It's November 26th at 7:09 p.m. We'll call the call to order the meeting of the Milton School Building Committee. Just running through a quick attendance. With me in the house is Scott Tereshak, present. John Cohane, present. Online we have Kerry Hurley.
Here.
Glenn Hoffman.
Here.
All right. Akbar Bong.
Present.
All right. Dr. Miranda.
Present.
Tim Lombard.
Present.
And Mark Loring.
Here.
And Sean O'Rourke. Perfect. So second thing on the agenda is citizen speak. So we reserve the first 15 minutes of our meeting for citizens that want to speak. We ask that you limit your commentary or speaking notes to 3 minutes. And please just state your name and address. There's nobody in the room with us tonight, so just look online in case somebody would like to speak. Just please use the raise your hand function.
That's just me, Mr. Panelist, because I can't share it.
Gotcha. Right. And seeing none, move on. Item 3 is approval of our past meeting minutes. Our last meeting was about a month ago, Monday, October 21st, 2024. Those minutes were distributed as part of your packets. Just see if you have any edits, comments, or anything like that on the minutes. If people do not have comments or edits, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 21st, 2024. Second.
All right. And then we'll do a roll call vote, unless there's other discussion, but I don't assume we do have any. So roll call vote, Scott Tereshak.
Yes.
John Cohane.
Yes.
Kerry Hurley.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman.
Yes.
Akbar Bong.
Abstain.
Okay. Dr. Miranda.
Yes.
Tim Lombard.
Yes.
Mark Loring.
Yes.
And Sean O'Rourke, yes. Item 4A, schematic design update. So essentially, we've got 2 portions of this. There's some updates to the, or that's under new business, right? The renderings.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Seamus put it under new business.
Yeah, he put it under new business. So we'll touch base on that. So as part of old business for our schematic design update, as many of you are aware, we worked to refine the design that we did over the summer, sharpen the pencils, for lack of a better word. And with that tighter design that we had there, we've had an updated construction cost estimate provided. So with that, Chanel, I'll let you or Sean kind of take it away.
Sure. We'll go through that.
Sure.
So just so everyone's aware, this is in, it's up on the share drive. I think we sent a link out to that just to remind you where it's at.
Yep.
As is the full estimate. So there's 2 columns here. One is our estimate that we did on in July 22nd, 2024. The right column is the 11/8/2024 estimate. Just so you know, I think there's 2 or 3 minor revisions to this. They sent out one, we provided comments back. And so these numbers here represent the final one that's included in, I think all of them are actually up on the website, or up on our shared folder, but the most recent one is noted. Most of the items are pretty close. I mean, there's some big changes in roofing went up, interiors went up, but then other items went down, HVAC went down. And I think the one thing to note here is the total construction cost has actually decreased by a little bit. And most of that money is coming out of our contingency. I think we've drawn down our contingency a fair amount by about, went from 14.2 million to 9.6. And that happens as you get closer and closer to your construction start date. The estimators get more and more sure about the actual cost of items, so they hold less and less contingency. So that's really what you're seeing here, is that they're seeing construction numbers holding firm on the dates we're going to construct at, and they're able to pull out some contingency out of that number and feel more comfortable with this $128.9 million construction cost only. That's not total project cost.
Also, just to keep in mind, this updated estimate, one of the other bigger differences is that the escalation includes pushing out the construction much further than the earlier estimate. And so while the overall construction cost went down by that 3.42%, we were able to include that change in the start date, which does obviously impact the bottom line. So that was
we have that here as well.
good news as well. I think also the other thing to note is that the site work package went down because the moving of the Gallup Road got a lot more precise with the way that they're treating the grading at the road and the way that grading has to come down in the building. So that those drawings that describe the road move are significantly more specific and have less cut and fill than what was in the earlier estimate. And we're going to continue to work with the civil and landscape architects to continue to hone in on that, because that is a big move as part of the package.
Just so we can go
You
down.
can see it down here. Building site prep went from 2.28 to 1.5.
Yep.
And then the building site went from 11.5 to 10.5. And I think that's to Shonali's point. The more and more they refine these drawings, the better the estimators can estimate these.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more they do it, the more comfortable the estimators are, and that results in that contingency decrease.
Mm-hmm.
The drawings are much more refined than the drawings that were sent out in July. Those are more square footage, rough number estimates, and these ones are really takeoffs and of glass and exterior and dirt and interior, the whole lot. So that's and that's what we expect to see, and that's what we hope to see, is that we continue to force the issue and to move that cost down and certainly not up.
And that's some of the trade-off too for contingency budget that was there, right? So like the 5 million that's come down to is still distributed, it kind of gets redistributed up as things get fine-tuned where they go higher, right?
It will, yes, if that were the case. In our case here, we're actually about, just under 5 million, or right around 5 million lower.
Yep.
So you could say that, well, it got taken off here, but the reality is you're right.
Yeah.
Money, items that are higher, items that are lower, all kind of balance out. And then our net result is that 3.4% decrease to the bottom line.
And the 3.4%, even with contingency going down, escalation has gone up, but overall it's 3.42.
Yes, and so that leaves our total project cost now based on what we ran the same numbers, left the same design fees, left the same epiphany, all that.
Yep.
We've set up 169,021,673. So that 173 comes down to 169. So it's about a $4 million. $4.5 million drop.
Then we also have, just on overall project costs, if we do the geothermal, there's a rebate cost that comes in with that too, right?
Yeah, so that was on that previous, I didn't bring any numbers with me, but
That's fine.
we can have, I would suspect that the geothermal rebate and the number, we estimated the same number of geothermal wells in this as in the other one, because there wasn't a square footage change in the building. You're seeing this cost savings come from the precision of the drawings, but the square footage of the building didn't essentially change. So you're going to still need the same number of geothermal wells. But those rebates, as long as they are still in, you'll still be eligible for them.
Okay. All right, open up to any questions from members.
Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, Mark, you recognized.
Thank you. Just 3 questions for Stuart, just to make sure I'm fully am communicating this correctly if anybody asks me. But so the understanding is the overall cost of the project is now, based upon this estimate, reducing from 173 to 168, 169. And at the same time, we've been able to push out, the estimation includes escalation that pushes out start date to June 2026. Is that correct?
We have early enabling packages for March 2026, which is like the road work is a separate flat work package. Building construction July 2026 is what our escalation is carrying us to for start of construction.
It's on the front page
Of the estimate.
yes.
Yeah, I saw that. I just want to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So the escalate, so from the feasibility to the SD, we did push out, I think it was like 8 months or something, don't quote me on that, but like we pushed it out. So you're gonna see an increase in that escalation as we get to a more realistic timeline for when we're gonna start. But at the same time, you're gonna see some of the other costs come down as we get more precise and we pick more specific materials. And we hone in on the exterior. Andrew and I have ideas of other areas of savings that we did not implement in the SD package because we haven't been able to present to you design options. So when we get to the next phase, we can start talking about those larger moves if there's more savings that need to be achieved.
You're talking about how much glass you put inside the building, right? Instead of walls and different finishes, tiles and floor finishes.
Proportion of brick to rain screen, you know, like roof material, like the stair materials, like there are all these things that start to impact the overall costs. And so if you want to change one material, what does that mean structurally? What does that mean in terms of the thickness of the walls? Do you lose square footage? Like there are all these things that we need to like sort out, but these we can't do on our own. These have to be done in conjunction with the school building committee and with Dr. Burrows to make sure that everybody knows what's happening with the project.
You know, on this estimate comparisons, you can see here, our escalation went from just about 5 million to 6.2. So it's up 1.2 million in escalation by moving that schedule. That's represented here.
Yep. One question for you on the estimate. It looks like the square footage actually went up too. It was 152, now it's 161.
So that, the biggest change, the reason for the square footage change is, so as we all know, there's a new energy code that came in, and we haven't seen any buildings really come online yet that have achieved that envelope and to meet the rating. And so in the feasibility study, again, there were really no buildings online, but what we've done is we've worked with the Director of Sustainability, and we have 2 schools in the office that are ahead of Milton, right? So they're really working with the engineers to understand that thermal comfort. And so the thickness of the exterior envelope wall had to grow substantially to capture the insulation to meet code. And so instead of losing square footage in the classroom, we kept the classroom sizes what they were, but those walls had to push out. And it is a little shocking that when you do that with such a large perimeter, that's really the bulk of your square footage. And then there are other areas where like they had to move a door out because we needed to get an extra 5 feet for code for egress. Like there are all these things. So it does, we're in the same ballpark, but again, in the next phase, we can look at those numbers and really discreetly say, here are opportunities to cut. But we felt it was in Milton's best interest to go with the more conservative, higher number so that we know that we can achieve this. And it's easier to talk about cutting after rather than add. We can't add.
So just one clarification on that too. The energy code you're referencing is a stretch energy code,
correct,
not the opt-in electrical one that the town recently adopted.
That correct.
Okay.
It's the stretch. It's the envelope. We have to meet a certain EY. The envelope We did bring the glass down to 23%, like, so the glass to solid percentage is there. But again, it's that wall thickness that drove a lot of that change in the footprint.
I see that in my line of work all the time because I'm figuring the square footage to the outside edge of the shelf. And a lot of other ways they figure in square footage to the inside surface, not the outside surface. So we come across that a lot.
When we had to make that change, that was a really big deal that day.
Messed up all your geometry.
Like, yeah.
Any other questions from members that are online or present to for the overall estimate?
I had them, but mine were answered. I had that, why did the percentage go down from 15 to 10, but you explained that, so I understand that.
Right.
And if there are any other questions, they can just run them through you, and Shonali and I or our team will be happy to answer with anything else that pops up. Sure. It's a pretty straightforward estimate, so it should be pretty straightforward answers for you.
Right. Right. I think we'll move on then. Mark has his hand raised.
Sorry.
Mark? No problem.
Sorry, I'm just going back right now, actively like looking at the two things. Like overall, it looks to me the subtotal of of the new middle school line, the pre-K line, the site work line between the July estimate and this estimate are actually pretty remarkably equal. Like they're pretty spot on with each other in terms of like 96 versus it was 95. So that actually number has gone up just slightly in terms of those three construction lines. But as you say, all the other stuff related to the kind of escalations and general conditions and things like that, those are the places where we're tightening things up because we feel more confident about those top three line numbers. But like the overall cost of what we're estimating, that kind of the middle school to cost versus the pre-K to cost versus the site work to cost is all generally around kind of what we thought it was going to be. Biggest change really is like site work. God.
Yeah, the building went up a little bit, and then the site work came down a little bit, and that balanced out. Yeah, and you're right. The direct cost subtotal, it's about $400,000 difference. So it's pretty close on a $97 million.
Yeah, that's really close. Great. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions from members? Seeing none, we move on to the next agenda item. To pull the agenda. Sorry, just to pull it. Yeah. So item 4B, which is MSBA update. So essentially, what we've asked PMA to do, so as everyone's aware, at least on the committee, in the next coming weeks, MSBA will make their decision whether or not Milton is invited into their core program for basically construction. What we've been talking about a lot of the time too is an analysis of, if we get invited into MSBA, it's going to basically hit us onto a longer timeline. So the discussions that we're just having around escalation come into play, where we have to look at the overall project, assume a longer timeline and what that escalation cost is associated with that, and look at that escalation cost, and then look at the amount of rebate that we'll be getting as part of joining MSBA, and kind of compare them to see, does it make more sense to just complete the project quicker on our own and forego MSBA funding, or do we go with MSBA and just see what that looks like? So I've asked PMA to kind of work through a potential analysis of that. So, Sean, if you want to take it away on that.
So for the new estimate, we ran through a new analysis of what we would expect for a grant, and it's roughly the same as what it would be before. The project cost is slightly less, but most of that would be, there would be some savings in there, but we're right around that $49 million grant rate off of that $170 million project cost.
Yeah, so just for the public's education too. So the published rate by MSBA was roughly a 45% reimbursement on eligible costs. But based on the project that we have there, that 45% essentially gets diluted down.
So about 29%.
Yep, to an
That's right.
effective rate of about 29%.
Right. And then we did have scenarios in the last meeting where we ran escalation years and years and showed, but I think what PMNC is saying it's about 4% a year at this point. So if you do the math, the MSBA grant is not likely going to increase. Your reimbursement rate's going to be about the same. They will increase square footage costs every so often. Normally it will keep up with inflation. It'll be somewhere, depends on the year. Some years they don't do an increase, some years they do. So if we assume a marginal rate of an increase, we start outpacing. If you waited longer than I think it was 4.5 years or something, you would basically dilute the grant with escalation. Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, like the break-even point on that is 4.5 year timeline. So if we got MSBA and we got it done exactly in 4.5 years, it would be the same cost to the town roughly as if we didn't go MSBA into the.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up the one that we presented at the last meeting. It shows. Okay, so these are from. Starting at the base here, and then if you go one more year, it shows that, if you're keeping roughly the same grant or a slightly increased grant, but you're adding escalation to the project, here's your escalation, and this is where you end up at. Right about 5 years, in between 4 and 5 years somewhere is where the numbers start flipping. The hard part to understand about the MSB is that until we have a little bit more detail in design, knowing where the exclusions are going to lie with the MSB project is still tough. So right now it's really just an estimate historic, where we're at. And as these estimates get further and further refined, we have a much better picture of what they would exclude for costs, what they wouldn't exclude. It has to do with how much site work you have. There's HVAC, it depends if they've carried the geothermal package. A lot of that the MSB considers as part of your site work, so that will increase your site work exclusion. So there's a lot of details that need to go into this to further refine it, but we just took a rough stab at it from the history of the MSBA and what we see as their reimbursement rates and what we think you can get. But I think that, for rough numbers, I think you can probably assume that somewhere around that 29-30% is what you'd expect out of any project from the MSBA from a reimbursement rate.
For a typical MSBA project, do you see them being completed in a 4 to 5 year window typically?
I think when we did the math, if they said yes, this year would add, I think we said 3 years to the project on an aggressive schedule, because we'd have to go back. Well, actually, I'll take it back. It really depends. If they make you, normally what happens, if you get invited to the MSBA program, it could be up to a year before you even hire an OPM. Right? That's the normal SOI. You form a committee.
270 days.
270 days. You do all that. If they let you accelerate that and said, okay, we already have a committee, they're still going to make you go out for OPM selection. They're still going to make you go out for designer selection. So then you're still going to have to do a feasibility study. If this is the project, you might be, if you use the same players, you might be able to significantly decrease the amount of time that takes.
Yeah, because the formulation of the team is actually module 2, I think. Right. So module 1 is
forming your committee SOI, and then for module 2 will be hiring the OPM.
Yeah. And
then module 3 will go into schematic design and feasibility study, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Yep.
So right now, as we sit, we can get a building ready to go in 18 months from today. If you said go, roughly, right? That's our schedule, July 2026. So if you're going to add another
3 years,
if you're going to add another year and a half to do a feasibility study plus hire a new team, and then another 8, assuming you're at that point 18 months from now, it's another 18 months to get you to construction.
Any questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yeah. I'm not very sure. I wish we still had the other document you were sharing on the screen. My question is on that.
This one here?
You were showing how we lose period over period, how potential of losing money. Yeah. I'm not very sure that I really understand the 9 million loss per year and the consistency of it over the periods of time. I'm not sure I understand it enough to be able to explain to my constituents how that's occurring.
So this is the MSBA's 3011 form. So what we did is just escalate construction costs within this form year over year. And what we're saying is that every year it's going to get X amount more expensive, and we used at PM&C's escalation rate. So after 1 year, it's going to tell you that $173 million project went up to $182 million. After year 2, it goes up to the 192. After year 3, it goes up to the 202. So it's increasing and escalating construction costs based on just the general idea that things get more expensive as time goes on. So
I get that. Okay. If that's the case, then shouldn't the percentage that we get from them also be increasing? It seems we have one figure increasing over time, but yet the benefit we have is not also increasing over time. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So if you look at the calculation, we're carrying the MSBA building funding limit at $586 a square foot plus $60 for site work in each of these scenarios. So I think you're right in that you could make assumptions. We haven't that the MSBA's reimbursement rate will increase year over year, but we've seen in the past that they just made an increase. So it may be another 2 to 3 years before they do that. We just don't know. If we want to make an assumption and say, let's assume the MSBA increases at a certain percentage a year to keep up with this, we can certainly do that and rerun the numbers.
So I'm not talking about an increase. If we're doing percentages, and we're saying that we're doing percentages, period over period, if what we expect the cost of building to increase, then if we're getting percentage, we're supposed to get a benefit of the increased percentage. But you're showing here,
yes, I understand what you're saying.
Showing 48 million consistent across every year. That computation to me is erroneous.
It's because the MSBA does not reimburse off a straight percentage. The MSBA reimburses off a percentage with a cap. So you're seeing that cap being hit year over year. So
and
they're saying
that starts from inception?
The cap is based on the square footage of the building. So if the square footage stays the same and the cost they reimburse per square footage is the same, you're not going to see a year over year increase in their grant. Unless you increase the amount of cost per square foot that the MSBA is going to reimburse you.
So just sorry for taking up this much time.
This is a really good point. It's not an easy point to understand. So I'm glad that you brought it up, and I'm glad that we're having the conversation because it is very important for people in the community and for the public to understand that.
Yes, that's where I struggle to tell my constituents. If we look at year 1, we have a $9 million reduction, yet we have a benefit of just rounding up here, 9 point something. The other one's 48. We go to year 2, it still stays at 48, but that doubles. To me, I've heard what you're saying, but the gut feeling is really difficult to explain this to anybody who maybe it's just me. Does anybody else feel this way?
Yeah. So it's not just you. It's the assumptions made is that we don't know what the MSBA will increase their cost per square foot cap year over year. And if you look at the historical data, there are stretches for multiple years where some years they don't do it. So if you assume that they are going to increase their cap year over year and then they don't, it's a poor assumption. So we've held the cost per square foot at what they're going to be at what they've just increased it to, or what it will be increased to actually at the end of the year by their most recent vote. And we have not increased that year over year because we don't know when, if in the future they're going to have the money or the availability to increase that. And if they don't increase that cost per square foot cap, you will not get more money as buildings get more expensive. You'll be capped at the cost per square foot of eligible costs.
Yeah, just to touch on something too, Aqua. So the building cost that's there, the 586 a square foot, for the building that we're doing, in regards to the overall 173 million is less. So even if it increases, it linearly the same as the other one. It's a smaller overall percentage of the number.
Yes. Yeah, if you do the calculation of what the construction cost per square foot is, I mean, our construction budget, maybe this is an easy way to explain it. Our construction budget in this scenario, the 4-year, is 164 million. That's for hard cost of construction. Of that, the MSBA would exclude this $84 million because that's what they're saying is over the funding cap. So the more, if this number goes up and that exclusion is going up at the same rate, you're not going to get any more money from the MSBA. I mean, it could certainly be a conversation for the committee. If they'd like to make an assumption of what that might increase, we can show you linearly over years how much that's increased. We can show you over the last couple of years. We can show you historically. And then the committee could make a decision that as you're reporting these numbers, report a cost per square foot of X amount per year as part of this calculation. And then we can provide those numbers as well. That would be fairly easy to do. It's just hard to nail down that number.
Yeah, you don't want to be too aggressive on it.
Right.
And yeah.
But Doc's point, maybe we're not aggressive enough here, and maybe we should be making some sort of assumption. So let me do some math on that and send it out through you. We can send it to the committee. We can show you historically how there have been multiple years where they haven't increased them. There's been years where they've done 2 increases in a year. So again, it's just a hard number to nail down. So I think it's a fair point that we can look at that, and then maybe the committee can make a decision on what they would like to use as that number. And so when they present it, people aren't as confused. Right.
But as it stands, it's just based on the increase that happens this year.
It's the increase that happens
This year.
I think it's December of this year.
Yeah.
So we assume that you'd be at that.
No others.
Right. And the other thing to note is that once you lock in on an MSBA project, so if they let you in and then you got through your SD, at that point, when they sign the project funding agreement, that's when your cost per square foot locks in.
Okay.
So depending when you,
now and then.
it's not between now and 5 years now. It might be another year or 2. So the number that you're going to see may not be as drastic as you think it might be, if that makes sense, right? They lock it in as soon as you.
And then nothing changes.
And then nothing changes, correct. I'll caveat that one time it changed where, like with COVID and things like that, they did make some budget adjustments, but that's the first time, and I believe the only time they've ever done it after project funding agreement was signed, where they gave more money per square foot. But the standard operating procedure for MSBA is once you get into that period and you lock in your project scope budget agreement, you get whatever it is at the time, and that's it.
I figured there must be some point where it stops.
Yes, and it's fairly early in the process. It's right at PSR, right?
Yeah, that's the schematic design, and so that's when you have to go and vote and approve and move the project forward. That means everybody's committed and you're locked in at that point. And you're not going to get additional incentives. Like it's a contractual legal agreement to the incentives. So and everything's hashed out at that point. What's included, what's excluded. If there's anything extra the town of Milton wants that the MSBA doesn't reimburse, you're committed. The town has to say, yes, we're paying for that. And the MSBA will commit and agree to all the square footages. Like it's a big binder actual agreement. And those numbers, those are the numbers.
And I mean, and this is the form they use. And so they publish this, we fill it out, they check it, they send it back to us. But that's why we use their form, because it's what you would expect to see from them. The town can appropriate money before this happens. Normally they do. It doesn't matter if you vote 2 years before this happens, as long as you have enough money in there, you're okay. But after you sign this, even if you add scope that is technically under their budget, they will exclude that scope because it's not part of your plan. Correct. So at this point, they really want you to have a project in mind. They want you to have it fully vetted out. They want you to have the full scope included in there. They want you to have the costs in there. You sign up and that's it. There's no additional funding from them beyond what they agreed to. And it's, it's to them so they can plan out their budgets over the next couple of years as well.
I think something else you might not be accounting for would be potential sunk costs. So if we have to go to MSBA, if you look at where we are today, if they follow the letter of their rules, we're basically starting all over. We go back, we redo a feasibility study, we redo a schematic design to get to where we are today. So all the money we've spent to date is essentially sunk.
That's a good
It
point,
would
yeah.
become cost on there as well.
Yeah, we have not put it in this budget, yeah, that would be
I
on
would add
top.
that to the cost of an SBA.
Sure.
SBA project.
So that'll erode some of that increase pretty quickly. Like if you've already spent $1.5 million, then you have to spend that again, then it just goes right on top of that budget.
Ideally, somehow they would let us reuse a lot of it, but I don't know.
I don't know.
It's
I
not
mean, all I can
really
say
their
is their process does not allow that and their procedure doesn't allow it. I'm not sure if there's any historic towns that have done it before that we could leverage to figure out how they did that, because it would certainly save the town time and money.
And the state too, really.
Yes, but they also, that it's a program that you willingly enter into, and part of it is you follow their rules. And when they start making exceptions and changing rules, that could make it a lot more difficult for them.
And it's a pretty detailed set of rules.
It is a very
I'm just looking at
detailed
module 1,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
but this will have to be a quick decision too, right? I mean, we
Correct.
find out
December.
December 13th, and we're gonna want what we have on the ballot. I mean, on town meeting, February
Correct.
24th is one way or another. We got a shot.
Yeah, this is eerily familiar to what was going on with Fonbon, but when we went after Fonbon before,
Yeah.
and it was around December when it fell through, and that fell through at the last minute, and the basic gave us kind of clear direction to go for the land swap at that point. So if we do decide to go with MSBA right now, if we're accepted in there, then I mean it's a kind of decision falls up to you guys at the select board for the most part. And the superintendent and school committee. If that's the decision that's made, then we pivot and we go that way. But if we're not accepted, I think we're clear enough with everything that everyone's done so far that we've got kind of direction on where we want to go. We've got a program, we've got the estimate and everything there. So the good thing is if we do get into MSBA, I've talked to a town administrator to ask, what can we do for the February town meeting to get us a jump start on this as quickly as possible. So once we get into the program, those first couple hurdles that are 270 days, I'd love to shrink that down.
Well, that's what I'm told. The first step is we need to approve the preliminary design for this eligibility period. We have to show them that we have approved that money for the preliminary design.
No,
For feasibility.
Yeah.
Feasibility study, I'm using the wrong term, but
Correct.
Yeah,
we need
you're
to show them that so that's what would be on February 24th, would be that feasibility money.
I think you have 270 days from the time from the time you get invited, you have 270 days to secure funding, form a committee, and then kind of show them, and then they'll let you go and hire an OPM and architect.
yeah, what I would.
But we want to speed that up.
Yeah, what I would like to do is get that feasibility funding, so they publish everything on their website, so we have an idea or ballpark of what it's gonna cost to get that apportioned or appropriated, so that we can, when the time comes, we don't have to wait for another town meeting to do that. We already have the appropriations done there, and then we can hit it, as fast as possible.
And they're paying 45% of that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we get into the overall project.
Right.
So, we'll basically run it first.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second, plug in.
And there are some things that the MSBA has to do as well on their end. So it's not, you may get accelerated, it's not going to be like overnight, because they have to go through enrollment options, they have to certify enrollments and things like that. So there is some legwork ahead of time that needs to be done. Like as you're reading through that module, you'll see that, there's a lot of stuff in there that has to happen, and you can probably speed it up more faster than the 270 days. But it's not, they're going to have to do their legwork, and they're going to want to meet with the town and meet with the school and talk through all the enrollment issues, the overcrowding issues, and really discuss that.
Any other questions from members? Raise your hand if you do. And if not, we can move on to the next agenda item. Seeing none, so pull up the agenda. Thanks. All right. All right. So that was item 4B.
I was just pulling the invoices up and it messed me up.
Yeah,
I think that's next, right?
yeah, so I think item 4C is approval of invoices for PMA invoice 10 for October 2024 and
And then Arrow Street.
and then Arrow Streets, October 2024. So again, those were sent out as part of our packets. So I'll just leave that open to everybody to kind of discuss. And then, you know, if and when the time comes, entertain, do it one at a time for, you know, start with PMA's invoice for October. Pull that up.
All right, there you go.
So the PMA was 3,858.
I'll make a motion to approve the PMA consultants invoice number 04745-10 dated November 15th, 2024.
Thank you, Carrie. Is there a second?
Second.
John seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. We'll do a roll call vote. Scott Tereshak,
Yes.
John Cohen,
Yes.
Carrie Hurley,
Yes.
Aqua Bong,
Yes.
Mark Loring,
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman,
Yes.
Dr. Miranda,
Yes.
Tim Lombard,
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke, yes. All right, the second invoice that we have up also is from Arrow Street for the design. So we'll get that kind of pulled out a little bit. There you go. Total on that invoice is $82,500. You know, similar, take a look, review, and when you're ready, entertain a motion.
My motion to approve the invoice number, Arrow Street invoice number 729-844 dated November 13th, 2024.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, Dr. Miranda, thank you. All right, assume no discussion, and so we'll go to a roll call vote. Scott Tereshak,
Yes.
John Cohen,
Yes.
Carrie Hurley,
Yes.
Aqua Bong,
Yes.
sorry, it keeps jumping around on me here. Dr. Miranda,
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman,
Yes.
Tim Lombard,
Yeah.
Mark Loring,
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke, yes. All right, next on the agenda, I think is new business. I think we're done with old business.
Cool, so I'll pull that up.
Yeah,
you're right. Invoices, yeah, new business, school design update, and then MSB update. So, school design is the presentation, right?
Yep. So school design update, I'll let Andrew and Shanali kind of take it over. So just to give an introduction to, so everything we've been doing to this point that we've seen has been, you know, floor plans, layouts and stuff like that. We're at a point now where the exterior of the building is starting to take shape. And what they wanted to do is kind of walk through some views or, you know, give some depth to kind of what everything looks like now. So Shanali, Andrew, I'll let you guys take it away.
Yeah, sure. I'll do a quick intro and then I'm sure Andrew will be able to speak to the design.
That's
But just to preface, this is obviously something that we did based off of the earlier estimates in terms of the portion of the materials and things that we wanted as a design that we interpreted hearing from the visioning sessions and our ongoing conversations with the principals and our boroughs, just to get something that feels like it would fit in with Milton. At the same time, we haven't gone through a design charrette with any of the principals or the boroughs or any of the teachers to really get into any of the level specifics. So this is our first out of the gate, taking all of the information that we learned about the town of Milton. And when we start the project back up in the next phase, we'll have a charrette where we can get into the specifics. But this was a combination of us, a culmination of everything that we learned about Milton, but also trying to get something in there that was realistic for the estimate so that Peter Bradley could put numbers to something. So as you know, that you've seen in the past, that there's an academic wing, and then there's the larger spaces wing. So we can go to the next slide. And Andrew, please feel free to jump in.
Sure.
So I also want to preface before we move forward that these are not what we call realistic renderings, where there's colors and all of that. This is really to understand what's the solid, what's the transparency on the window, what is the roof line, how are the two buildings of the middle school and the preschool speaking to each other, how are we navigating around the site. We haven't presented any exterior material colors, so just to keep that in mind, that we're still.
Nice step up from just the box.
Yeah, it's just it's a step up from a white box. But we do own, from the estimate, we own a certain percentage of brick for masonry. We also own a certain percentage of rain screen and glass, and that's all reflected in these views. So here we have the overall aerial that's towards the entrance. We see the new Gal Road and the parking on the academic wing, the gymnasium on the right, and then the preschool in the back. But if we go to the next view.
Actually, Shanali, could I interrupt? Just if we could stay back on the first slide for a second. Sorry to interrupt. But I think it's just worth taking a moment to talk about the kind of, and I agree with everything that was just said about, everything we've learned about Milton. And this is really kind of synthesizing the educational plan of the district, the kind of constraints and opportunities of the site, the desire to co-locate, a pre-K with the middle school on the same piece of property, but have a campus feel with kind of independent sense of character for the pre-K and the middle school, and thinking about even the larger campus of how this facility can relate to the high school, which is, just up the road. And so, what you're seeing here is how all of that, which until now we've been kind of looking at in terms of 2 dimensions and budgets and schedules, et cetera, how that can start to take shape physically and kind of be something that's, an inspirational facility for the town and for the students. And so I'd like to just, take a minute to talk through how those ideas are playing out, and then we can kind of point out the attributes of the specific parts of the school. But, when just looking at this view, I think it's very, very telling at how we've kind of created these 2 spaces where the buildings are on the hand of the middle school, responding to Guile Road and creating this moment of arrival, and using the curve of the building to kind of echo the curve of the road and of the athletic field and of the contours of the site. And while if you look to the back of that image, you see that the pre-K has a different kind of roof shape. And we've adjusted the roof of the auditorium to kind of echo that. And then so you can kind of get a feel that there's a sense of arrival in place for both the pre-K and the middle school. And they both have a kind of feeling about them that's appropriate to their use and to the kids that are going to use it. And so if you go to the next slide, we've added some labels to kind of orient where things are, and the entry is where you would sort of hope to the middle school, where the kind of volumes are coming together. I'm going to draw over this a little bit. I think it'll show up. So at the ground level, people and students and kids, and they're able to kind of in a way, be cradled by the volume of the overall building, but then kind of arrive into. I'm going to try not to draw too much. Okay. And so that's our entry point. We have our academic wing kind of curving along the top here, which, is sort of creating this counterpoint to Guile Road. We have located in our loading dock here off of Guile Road, which works out, quite well logistically. We've got our gymnasium sort of anchoring this end of the building. And then, as I was saying before, that you kind of come back up here and have the pre-K space. We've got another view of that, which is a little bit more zoomed in. And maybe we can.
Also, the other thing is to note, and this is we've talked about before in the plans, is that we made the taller portion of the building more forward towards Guile Road, being sensitive to the houses that are on the other side of the pre-K, so it stays relatively low for a much longer distance than we've been seeing in past iterations, to be sensitive to those houses on the other side of the tree line.
And so here's a view looking from sort of the athletic field side to give you a sense of some of the complexities of the site that the design has now sort of negotiated. And what you're seeing here is sort of the backside of that academic wing, but you're also getting a feel for how we're taking advantage of setting the cafeteria and media center, which are here, with views opening up to the landscape, and with the pre-K kind of creating a play space up against the hill here. And interestingly, the sense of scale of the building is, at least if you're from, it's different depending on where you are. So if you're up here on the athletic field looking, this feels like a 3-story volume, possibly slightly less than how it would feel from Guile Road. And if we go to the next slide, we can add the labels. So here's that cafeteria, and what we've talked about in prior meetings. There's this entrance to the school, or from the sort of second floor, where you can kind of spill out to an outdoor area and have a landscape connector that slopes back down to Guile Road and then back up to the high school, which we imagine could be a valuable connection. We've got our pre-K volume, which has a very residential feel to it, and we imagine this as a wood frame building. And one of the advantages of separating out the pre-K from the middle school, and to Shonali's point, I think will successfully kind of blend and relate to the residential abutters on that end of the other side of the property. And then you can see how the roof of the auditorium echoes what's going on with the pre-K and becomes and sort of carries on over the cafeteria, and how those two work together to sort of define a kind of sense of place and belonging for the pre-K that is all its own and sort of independent from the middle school. And if we go to the next one, so here's zoomed in and sort of looking more as an entry view, kind of from the Guile Road perspective, and where you can really kind of understand the form of the building and the kind of path to move into the front door. And we can turn on the tags on the next.
So I think the other thing to note that's really important about this view is, in addition to the entry, is the separation of the bus and the car lanes, and how wide that sidewalk is, and the relationship to the edge of the building. We try to make it as welcoming as possible for the kids, for crossing the road, for getting there safely. But these are all things that we think about. And so from the feasibility to the schematic design, that parking area that's significantly refined, partly due to the change in the grades of the road and the way that the Guile Road was turning into the building, But it also gave us some breathing room for that overhanging at the front of the building that helps draw you into that entry area and protects the students in inclement weather.
And then lastly, this is a view from the entry side to the pre-K, excuse me, where you can see that even though a portion of the middle school is visible, that it's working together with the language of the pre-K to kind of make this feel like its own place with its own separate entry and own separate identity, which is something that we heard was really desirable and important when, co-locating cohorts of such different ages, that they really feel like they have a part of this that belongs to them. And we think that that's starting to be expressed here, and looking at the language of, in the pre-K, more playful sort of window placement and sizes, and creating some texture and tactile opportunities along the exterior of the building, things that are of the scale of a young child, and that would be feeling more welcoming to them. And if we go to the next slide. So just to kind of, again, point out that we've got our academic wing in the background here, and then the auditorium and cafeteria volume that's fronting onto the north side of this arrival area, and how that's working in concert with the pre-K volume and its sloped roofs. So we think that it's gotten to a very nice place in terms of really negotiating a lot of complicated challenges. And I think, one testament to the success of that process has been that, some of the site costs have come down and since the earlier iteration, and that has come from very careful tuning of the grades of the building and where the finished floor should ideally be located, so that we're minimizing the site work and need for retaining walls and so on. And I think we've been able to do a pretty good job of that, as evidenced by the kind of stability of the estimate. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at. Happy to take questions.
All right, so you got a couple of hands up, so jump on first. Aqua, you're recognized.
Thank you. My understanding is that what was shown to us is not the final product. There will be some more coloring or color choices added to the building. Is that correct?
Yes, good question. So just to be clear, these images are not meant to show you that like this is the actual color and material of the building. And in fact, we've kind of done these renderings as if these were built out of out of wood, as like a model in a model shop almost, which is sort of just a reflection of where we are in the process. So it's more about how it's organized. What does the mass of it feel like? What's the character of it starting to feel like? And sort of the next step in this, if we were to, be starting up having another meeting in 2 weeks, would be to start showing you options for materials. And we're thinking about, masonry and, some wood on the pre-K, but on the middle school, largely working with masonry, and there's many different types that can be used for that. But it's in this economy, it's quite cost effective while also being beautiful and durable and low maintenance and things like that. So that would sort of be where we pick up when we do, is to start to look at that.
Thank you.
All right, Carrie?
I just would like to comment on the pre-K. I think that the roof line is fantastic, and I picked up immediately that you were going for that residential look. I think having that abut the neighbors is an excellent compromise, and I was just thrilled to see this. So thank you so much for the care and attention to all of the comments that have been coming towards us. This is terrific.
Thank you.
Anybody else online? Mark? Yeah, Mark, go for it.
Yeah, no questions. I'll echo what Carrie said. I think all of it looks really good, and especially kind of the pre-K wing. I know, I think Tom McCarthy might prefer a flat roof just from a maintenance perspective. Those are easier, but this looks really nice. The whole thing looks really nice. And so, again, appreciate all the work y'all have done, and wish we could have that meeting in 2 weeks. No, we had to forward, unfortunately. But yeah, really appreciate all that y'all are doing. This looks great. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a question on my end too, Andrew. So the white boxes around the window, those are opportunities for color. So similar to what you see at the Josiah Quincy School that just went up along the Mass Pike.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yes, those are opportunities for color and character and making, unique moments in the various classrooms, so that one classroom is a little bit different from the next. You're exactly right.
Okay. And then on the pre-K, the vertical components, if you want to call it that are there, is that like a vertical rain screen or something? I'm just trying to understand exactly.
Yes, that's correct. So the thought there is that, if this is a wood frame structure, that we might be able to incorporate some wood elements, and we've been looking at and have used on some prior projects. The generic term is thermally modified wood, which is actual wood, but it's been stabilized and modified to be very durable and hard wearing and not requiring the kind of maintenance that you might have from a typical something you might do on a home. And so these are potential areas where we might look at incorporating something like that. And thought that it could be a really lovely kind of counterpoint to the big kids in the big school, at the middle school, and that you can imagine kids running their hands over it, and just relating to the scale of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, Aqua, you still have your hand raised, and you do not anymore. So there we go. Anybody internal? Questions, comments? All right.
No more questions from me. That was in there.
No problem. I'm guilty of that at times too. All right. So I think we're good on this one. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And so,
MSB update?
yeah, we kind of covered that previously. So again, we're just waiting for, a decision from MSBA, and based on that decision, we'll go down from one or two paths that we got to figure out. So patiently waiting. I think that kind of plays into one of the things that we're going to need to, when we talk about our next meeting, is, just have some availability. Probably, it may even be, I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think our next meeting would be the 9th.
Yeah, on the agenda it says the 2nd or the 9th. The
Yeah.
2nd, I think, is Monday, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure with the holiday if the MSBA is going to get back to you between now and then.
It'd be interesting if we did.
I think there'd be a better chance that they got back to us by the 9th than by the 2nd.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then the next select board meeting, do you know when that is?
That's the 17th.
17th. Okay, I just want to make sure we got a meeting in before.
Yeah, we're the 17th.
Yeah, so are we on that agenda item yet for?
Yeah, future meeting is the next one.
Yeah.
As unanticipated items, if there is any, and then it's future meeting dates.
Yeah, we've got no unanticipated items unless anybody else has anything, they want to throw out there.
One of the things in the attachments was the select board questions.
Correct. Yeah. So we have got a number of questions in from the select board. I think I forwarded it to everybody, or it was in the packet that we have here. So for some of the questions, based on kind of where we are, we're going to be able to answer them to the best of our ability. But other things may be a bit too technical. I know one of them was in reference to what masonry block we're using and stuff like that, and we're just not there for this kind of where we're at. So this is something we're all the design teams working on stuff like this. So the anticipation is as we get to the select board and we give our next presentation, assuming we don't get accepted to MSBA and we're going the other way, we just want to make sure that, you know, all the questions are there. And obviously there's probably going to be follow-ups, which is understandable. But, you know, at least this gives us a head start of, so we just don't walk into the meeting and, you know, have these presented to us or requested from us, and we're just answering live over there.
Yeah, I looked at the list of questions, and I would say that a lot of them we can provide some answer to at this point. Some of them, it's just too early. But then there's some like, what is the cost of implementing the new energy code in the building? That's going to be a hard one to answer without designing a non-energy code compliant and then an energy compliant building, having them estimate both of them and, you know, take the difference. They're designing an energy code compliant building, and that's what we're estimating. So things like that get a little bit more challenging. I wonder, I don't know if that's talking about the new Milton opt-in code and trying to get some insight into what the extra cost for this building is, but I'm not sure how we would be able to determine that.
And I think that's going to be one that's going to require a follow-up. You know, mainly that's why I pointed out earlier when you were talking about the building getting larger due to the energy code. It was the stretch energy code that was adopted a couple of years ago, not the opt-in electrical.
So part of what you can do is there are, I'm going to get a little technical. There are a couple of different ways of running energy models. Like you can do a design energy model, a Teddy model, like the new energy, like there are different series of models, but for the schematic phase, we did not run a design energy model, which we would do in a normal course of a project, but we will do it when we pick up in DD. Like that will be one of the first tasks that we do. So we could run an LCCA model, which is what GGD will then take sort of that model information and run the LCCA. That will help you get a baseline difference between, not necessarily for cost, but the change in energy usage, which then you can help extrapolate further down the road to answer this question. But we don't have that information yet because we haven't run those models. All of that information was provided in that updated fee proposal that we sent. So when we get there, we'll be able to answer that question, and it's actually going to be one of the first things that we have to do in the next phase is to start getting these specific metrics on the building so that all of the design team can move forward with the right level of information. And we wouldn't have been able to run it until now anyway. We just didn't have enough of the building design to put in the right information into the model. Like you have to know what the exterior is going to be. You have to know how much insulation there's going to be. Like you have to know all of these things. And we didn't know it until we did the schematic. So.
And some of the other ones, like what type of roof and what is the warranty? That question we answered, well, there's different roofs you could put on the building, and that would be a decision that the committee would have to make. And oftentimes it's based on, you know, cost. You know, you can get different types of roofing systems that have different warranties associated with them. What do you want? We can tell you how much it costs. What we can't answer is what is assumed at this point.
Yeah, and the facilities director will weigh in on that.
Yes,
Just going online, Carrie, I saw your hand up, and Glenn, I saw your hand up. I just didn't know if you guys still want to speak.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that we probably need the school committee to answer some of these questions, right? Like the staffing costs, like that's not us. I wouldn't think.
Yeah, correct. It'll be a combined effort between us and the school committee.
Just, we don't want to get out of our league. We're just building, right? We're not managing.
Right. All right, Glenn.
Sean, I was just going to ask, and I know I just realized we're probably not there yet, if we've done any kind of comparison between the energy costs of the current Pierce Middle School and what this new building is going to cost to run, because obviously the new building is going to be far less to run from an energy standpoint than the Pierce Middle School, and that might be a kind of a goodwill thing we could show the public at some point. But like I said, I don't think we're there yet as far as analyzing what the costs are going to be at the new building.
Yeah, so you're reading my mind, Glenn. So when costs of energy, you know, came up to operate the building over the course of a year, I know that question's been out there a couple of times, and obviously to get that done, there's specific needs to flow into an energy model, run the calculations. From a worst case perspective, you know, Pierce is roughly the same size and, you know, has 20-year-old systems in it. So we get, you know, what I was going to say is we could take that and say that's a whatever we agree to as a committee, that's a worst case. You know what I mean? If we were to look at that to build something now, see what that cost is and just know whatever our building annual cost is going to come in significantly less than that. What percentage? That'd be what I want to dive into a little bit more to look at, how much more efficient it would be. But obviously for me, if people are looking for a hard number to put there, that was like the worst case number I would put out.
And then,
Even with the new systems at the piers, the wall construction, the roof, the R value in the roof is going to be probably less than half of what you're going to get in this new school. I think at the end of the day, you're going to see that people would see that this is going to be a much more efficient building than really any other, municipal building in Milton right now, except maybe the new fire station.
Yep. John?
I think there are percentages out there too for how much better, rough idea for how much better codes are now than they were, along your lines of trying to come up with, compare peers to do it.
And that's exactly what I was thinking when this came out. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to get a full energy study done, but we could take a similar building, call it Pierce, that was built 20 years ago, and look at some efficiencies that we think, and apply some percentage to that of efficiency there, and scale that based on the cost model for that, and assume that's what this new building is going to cost. I think that's the only way to kind of get to a logical response for that question, rather than just saying we can get it later. Any other questions regarding these? Just again, we're kind of on unanticipated items. So if anything else that anybody has, feel free to chime in. Anything? All right, just double check.
Oh, no.
All right. So next thing on the agenda, I think, is next meeting, right? Yeah, future meetings. So I think for us, for now, we'll aim for December 9th. For our next meeting, between now and the 2nd, again, there won't be much movement. So I think the 9th would be our best next bet for our next meeting. So see if that works for everybody, and just see a lot of heads nodding, so that helps. All right. So last thing on the agenda is adjournment. So I entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All right. Roll call vote. Scott Tereshek.
Yes.
John Cohane.
Yes.
Carrie Hurley.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman. I think that is a yes. Aqua Bond.
Yes.
Dr. Miranda.
Yes.
Tim Lombard. Take a second for him to unmute. Go next. Mark Loring.
Yes.
And Sean O'Rourke, yes. Count Tim as the abstention. All right. Thank you very much. See you in a few weeks. Have a good night and happy Thanksgiving.